Welcome to the D2C marketing opportunities that senior attorneys present to growing law firms live stream program. My name is Jeremy Pook, and I lead Senior Attorney Match. We're Boston area based, and we work with attorneys that have practiced more than 30 years to help them design and implement succession plans for their law practices. We're very excited for today's program where we're going to be welcoming absolute masters and very experienced professionals in the area of digital marketing for law firms. And we're going to start the program by showing an infographic that just really shows where we are in today's and frankly tomorrow's market about business development for law firms. Here we are in 2021 and beyond. That is, we have an ongoing shift in consumer behavior where consumers today are going straight to Google, and they are looking for their attorneys, not just by finding them on websites, but find them on multiple, really omni-channel venues for where consumers can search for and find lawyers. The problem with that oftentimes for senior attorneys is that a lot of senior attorneys have not fully entered the digital age. And as we think about what is the value that senior attorneys present to growing law firms, and we'll be talking about that more today during this live stream, there's really four components to value that senior attorneys present to growing law firms. And those are the client lists that senior attorneys have, their referral source lists, the goodwill, and their subject matter knowledge. We'll be talking a lot today about the goodwill in terms of their digital goodwill. When lawyers are thinking what the value of their law practices is and what it can be and what it presents to growing law firms, so much of that beyond the proverbial book of business that senior attorneys present is what is their goodwill, and we're focusing today on the digital value components of that goodwill. So very excited to introduce our first guest today. Our first guest today is Chip Lafleur. Chip, welcome.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate being here.
Of course. And Chip leads a Michigan-based digital marketing company called Lafleur. And Chip is the proud author of a book that came out in 2020 about digital marketing for lawyers and law firms. Chip, really excited to welcome you today. And Chip, could you just share with us, please, your origin story and why it is that Lafleur focuses on law firms, and you can tell us a little bit about the book too, Digital Marketing for Law Firms.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you. Well, I've been working in marketing for over 20 years. And, I started out when a website was just kind of an afterthought, not something that people really thought too much about, and quickly got into starting to learn HTML, CSS, and really on the back end building things. And I've kind of gone from there. I worked at several different agencies, and it was actually at one of those agencies in Texas where I met a very good friend of mine, Tom Crosley, and started to do some work for him. And then ended up in a situation where he was ready to part ways with that agency, and I was as well. So I left, and then he ended up joining me at the next one. And then finally I said, I'm gonna open my own. And then he and I got talking, and I had the opportunity to meet with and talk to his clients and really see the impact that he was able to have as a personal injury lawyer, and had my own preconceived ideas of personal injury law going into that were quickly changed, and heard those stories of people whose lives were positively impacted by a really good attorney. And that's what really led me and my team at that time to say, we're going to focus on this area because it's a way to make marketing turn into something that really helps improve lives. And so that was appealing. And then, we've been doing this for a while. And of course, in the process, we see a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of scam artists out there. There's a lot of great companies too that do good work. And but I keep getting frustrated. I kept getting frustrated with questions about it. Always seemed like it was some fake entity in Salt Lake City, and so all these black hat agencies out there. And we decided, what we could do to help lawyers avoid getting scammed and being taken advantage of, and also help them to really set themselves up very well, is write a book that is the nuts and bolts of here's how you do it. And so I'm the author, but we had several other writers who worked on this, and we tried to pull in subject matter experts to peel back the way that we do things and to help lawyers understand that, and essentially be able to take it on themselves if they want to, but then also be able to better communicate and better hold accountable the agency or their internal marketing team, so that they could speak the language. This isn't something that's covered in law school, so empower them to ask the right questions, look for the right answers. And so that's what we wrote the book for. And books published through Trial Guides, a big part of that proposal that we sent them to write the book had to focus on, like, this is not a sales pitch for us, for our agency. It's not a sales pitch for any agency. This is a tool that's meant to help you maximize your marketing dollars, especially in the digital space.
Terrific. Thank you. So in terms of D2C marketing, right, direct to consumer marketing, we hear so often one particular word: content. And so could you just share with us, from the perspective of law firms generally and senior attorneys that have developed a significant amount of content, because by the time an attorney has practiced 30 plus years, Chip, typically have an expertise. You referenced a personal injury law colleague of yours, typically developed a lot of content, but how do they get that content out to the market, to the consumers that can take advantage of that content and really need to benefit from that content? Could you talk to us about a content strategy?
Yeah. So, at the heart of it, you have to write things that people are interested in reading, right? And so having a good understanding of who your audience is, the type of questions that they have, and I kind of liken it to having a library. And if you have a library that just answers one question with one book, you're not going to get a ton of traffic to that. But if you start to build up that library by answering people's real questions in a way that speaks to them at their level and where they are in their life, you start to build up something that's appealing for people to come to. And if they could find an answer to their question, that's going to then segue them into seeing the author or the website that's on as being the expert. And that's going to increase that perceived value. And so there's a number of metrics that we look at to measure how that works, but there's also kind of a hard to measure metric, which is, how do you pre-qualify the firm that's writing this content? Well, you build that trust. And so content marketing really lets you start moving people further down the funnel, first by attracting them, so they get to your site, they read the content, but then really having that humanistic element of, hey, this appeals to me, this makes sense to me, this helps me answer a question, but now I'm looking to you as the expert. And when you reference an attorney who's been in practice for 30 years, if they have all of that content living on their site, they have this pre-built library. And it doesn't mean there's not going to be some overlap, if that attorney joins another firm, but you still have this wealth of content that's probably driving a lot of traffic. And then it's a question of, well, how do we maximize the value of this? Because, if this is a transaction where the new firm is going to gain control of that, is going to have that, then you want to make sure that you put that to use. And some of that's going to be from just taking and porting the content over. Some of that may come from doing redirects and saying, hey, this content used to live here, it lives here now, and to preserve some of that traffic and some of that visibility.
Sure. So you bring up a couple really great points. I want to get back to the redirect piece in just a moment. But if we could go to maximizing the value of the content, because so many senior attorneys, they went to law school to be lawyers and not to be the millennials that their grandchildren are. And, often people we see so often, okay, well, just find a millennial to do that for you. Well, but when the millennial is beating you to new business, right, it's not a joke anymore. And so when senior attorneys, as we're encouraging them to join growing law firms, could you give us an example of, let's just say, the attorney that just wrote an article for a local law journal, spent a lot of time on that article. It's a terrific article about a new tax law that is coming out. They're clearly the authority on it, but other tax attorneys that are 30-somethings are actually getting the business, and not this 62-year-old that just wrote this amazingly valuable, content-rich article. What's an example? How would you, if you were advising the growing law firm that was now working with the senior attorney, how do you maximize content like that?
That's a great question, and it speaks a little bit to what I mentioned is reaching the audience where they are. And so when you have this in-depth article that's a thought leadership piece for other attorneys, that is not the same sort of content that most of your users are interested in digesting. And so having someone who can come at it with, really the knowledge of the law and the understanding of what's being said, but then almost like a translation service, translate that into bite-sized pieces, divide it up by section, and then really bring it to about an 8th grade reading level. And there's a handful of tools out there that our content team uses to do that. Now, we're very lucky. We have someone on our team, Lee Ibram, who has her JD, but she also has the ability to, again, empathize with the readers, right? And so we take that and we try to bring that to about an 8th grade reading level. And a single piece like that could easily turn into 10 or 20 different pieces that, again, really focus on kind of answering a specific question. And it can still answer that question in depth, and it can be relatively lengthy. Some of the best performing content out there is more north of 3,000 words, but it has to be able to be consumed in a way that the consumer is going to be able to wrap their heads around it. And then ideally formatted for the web in such a way that, the results in search are going to take them directly to that part of the article that has the answer. And so you may be able to rank for a number of different terms. If you build it right, it's still going to take you to where the answer is. But then the user gets to see that there's a whole wealth of additional information there.
Terrific. Thank you. And then Chip, in one of the parts of your book, you write about brand ambassadors. Okay, those are the people, those are the referral sources, former clients, colleagues that are out there promoting, saying, okay, I recommend, Attorney Jones to be your estate tax attorney because ... Could you speak to us about from the digital standpoint? Because when I think most senior attorneys think of brand ambassadors, it's, well, I'll send out my Christmas card to 3,000 people. Those are my brand ambassadors, and hopefully I'll get some business out of that. How can the senior attorney that has thousands of clients, often tens, if not hundreds of referral sources, if they join a growing law firm, what are some bits and pieces of advice that you can share, some nuggets of advice really that you can share for increasing the touches with brand ambassadors?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, building out those lists and segmenting them is hugely important. The more targeted you could be in your communications, the better you're going to be. And so there are many tools out there. The one that we like, that we have a lot of experience with, that I think just hits the real sweet spot in terms of functionality and price point, is a platform called SharpSpring. And we use that extensively. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to build automated tracks with decision trees in them if we want to, but they can be very simple. And you could build, an automation, for example, that sends out a happy birthday note, and that happy birthday note can reference the age if you want to do that. It can reference the person's name, anything that's in the database, you could populate in there, and it really personalizes that message. And then when it comes to really segmenting that list, you're going to have other attorneys in your list who are referral partners. You're going to have former clients. You're going to have other businesses. And being able to speak specifically to those audiences is going to bring back that personalization. And so, the Christmas card is a great example. Everybody gets the same card. Somebody might sign it, somebody might not. But it doesn't necessarily feel too personal. With email communication, list building, and some other tools, you're able to really personalize that message and make it feel like it's more about them. And you're able to do that in a very nuanced way. So I think that's one way to make use of that, and have that be something that happens consistently. We do a lot of newsletters. Those newsletters go out to our lists. We're always growing the list because there's always going to be some churn on the other side of it. But you want to outpace, you want your list growth to outpace the churn. And that does take a lot of work. But we know that every time we send out that newsletter, again, if the message is focused on the audience, we're going to get a good response. We usually get some cases out of that.
Well, terrific. Chip Lafleur, if we can just show the book again that you published in 2020 on digital marketing for law firms. Chip, really appreciate that you joined us today, and really recommend that whether it's senior attorneys, growing law firms, it's a great investment. It's an easy read, Chip. You really did a great job in just laying out those nuts and bolts that lawyers and law firms need to be considering in the digital age for marketing for their law firms. Thanks for joining us, Chip.
Thanks so much, Jeremy.
I'm very excited to introduce Guy Alvarez of Good to Be Social. Guy, welcome. Really excited to have a conversation. You and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and know that you're an attorney by training. We'll ask you about your origin story in just a moment. But we know this space is something that you are very comfortable in, very well versed in about digital marketing for law firms. And really looking forward to hearing your perspective on today's topic, which is the D2C marketing opportunities that senior attorneys present to growing law firms. So, Guy, if you could just share with us some background information about yourself and how you've evolved to become the Chief Engagement Officer at New York-based Good to Be Social.
Thanks, Jeremy, and a pleasure to be here today. So my story, as you mentioned, I did start out as an attorney. Actually, my origins really, when I graduated law school, I wanted to get into customs and international trade law. And the year I graduated law school, it was a difficult time to get a job. So I was trying to get a job, and after some not so successful efforts, I actually picked up a book, believe it or not, at Barnes & Noble called How the Internet Can Help Your Business. It had nothing to do with law firms, but I read it and figured out how I could use it. And the very next interview I had, I actually sold myself as an internet expert after reading one book. And that helped to get me hired. I started to work at the firm. And then my firm was very close to the Court of International Trade in downtown Manhattan. And every morning I would walk by there, and they would put out these sort of summaries, case summaries of what had gone on the day before. There was no social media back then, but there were these things called listservs, which are still in existence. So I had created 2 listservs, and every morning I would pick up the latest cases. I would go back to my firm. I would go on the listservs and basically say, hey, this is the latest decision that just came out. This is how it might affect your business. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And within a couple of months, we landed the second largest cotton exporter in the United States as a client. And really it went from there. I started to get a lot of notoriety about how to use the internet as a lawyer. I was asked to join several other firms. But instead of doing that, I actually went and started my own little company, Not Good to Be Social, a different company back then. We were doing websites and helping law firms market themselves. And then I got approached by what today is law.com. Back then it was called the New York Law Publishing Company. I was beating them in a lot of the proposals, and they sort of bought me out, and I joined them, and I ran law.com for a period of years. And move forward a couple of years, I went on to become global digital marketer at KPMG, in charge of all digital marketing. Then I went on to the Practicing Law Institute, where I headed their online division. And then about 10 years ago, I started Good to Be Social.
Wow. Well, it's a tremendous bio, and thank you, Guy, for joining us today. And certainly want to give a plug to an annual publication from Good to Be Social that we'd encourage the viewers and listeners to access on the Good to Be Social website, which is your 2020 Social Law Firm Index, which provides a tremendous overview in terms of where we are as an industry from a digital marketing standpoint. So want to ask you a few questions, Guy, about the Social Law Firm Index, and then directly on the D2C value that senior attorneys can present to growing firms from a marketing standpoint. So can you just tell us from a 30,000 foot view, where are law firms today generally in terms of multi-channel marketing? What are some of the trends that you're seeing? Here we are in 2021, certainly in and coming out of finally COVID.
So they've come a long way. We started doing the Social Law Firm Index about 6 years ago. And every year we've seen firms figuring out the digital space more and more. Interestingly, I feel smaller firms sometimes are more advanced at the large AmLaw 100 firms because a lot of firms realize that they need to use digital marketing tactics to really thrive and survive, whereas some of the bigger firms have been a little bit slower to adopt. But even there, you're seeing a significant increase in their digital marketing activities. And now you have full-time personnel dealing with digital marketing, a much increased investment in marketing technology. I think the biggest challenge that law firms have in general is trying to quantify the return on investment that they're getting from their digital marketing efforts. A lot of firms are doing it, but they're not necessarily figuring out how to figure out their, what they're getting out of it.
Got it. And the big letter word that that I see and read about all the time when it comes to digital marketing is content. And you write about quality, client-centric content. So could you just, I feel like I'm in a law school class, but I'd love to know how you put a definition around quality, client-centric content.
Sure. So a lot of firms struggle. If you look at most firm websites, what you see is it's all about them, their lawyers, their practice areas, their awards, and they're not really focusing on the client. And one of the things I've heard a lot from clients is at the end of the day, clients don't really care what you do. They care about what you can do for them. So if your website doesn't inform them specifically what you can do for them, what you can help, how you can help them solve the issues that they're facing, if you don't properly convey the fact that you have knowledge and experience in those issues and how you can help them, then you're really not taking it to the level where you need to be as a law firm and as a lawyer.
Great. And now moving into senior attorneys, I'm often saying, Guy, that senior attorneys present 4 values. There's really 4 components to valuing a law practice, such as the book of business that a senior attorney has, which are the clients and the referral sources, the goodwill of a senior attorney, and the subject matter knowledge. In the context of content that senior attorneys, that their digital value can provide, that's really in the goodwill and the subject matter knowledge. So when senior attorneys are joining growing law firms that have a digital marketing strategy, your clients, good to be social clients, what are some examples that you can think of that a senior attorney that has developed an expertise and terrific subject matter knowledge, typically in 1 to 5, areas that they've developed over the course of their careers, what are some examples of what that digital value can present to a growing law firm?
Well, I think you failed to mention one thing that I think senior attorneys have that is very, very powerful beyond content. And I'll answer the content question, but it's their network, right? The network, as a professional, probably one of the most valuable things that I have is my network, the people that I'm connected with. And when you take that to the digital world, it's my network on LinkedIn, right? The more connections I have on LinkedIn, the more likely people are going to be able to see my content when I publish that content. And not only that, but if any of those connections of mine like my content, share my content, comment on my content, now everyone in their network is going to see my content as well. So having those connections and being able to leverage those connections really provides a law firm incredible opportunity to get their content in a very, very large audience, very targeted audience that they wouldn't be able to do, if they didn't have those senior attorneys with large networks.
Yeah, it's a great point. Let's take a step back, though, because I think you're right. You're right about the power of that network. But what happens, and Guy, I see this a lot, where a senior attorney's network, is really an old school network of going into an in-person, a physical room, and people know this person. They may or may not send out a Christmas card list, Christmas cards to a list of their, of their network. They don't necessarily have 500 plus. I'm often going on to senior attorney LinkedIn pages and see 200 connections, 56 connections. What's the opportunity there if you were to run into a senior attorney that has 50 connections on LinkedIn, but has a client list of 3,000 clients?
Right. So the opportunity is obviously leverage that knowledge that you created, leverage the content, whatever content you've created, but certainly have an opportunity to add all those clients as connections on LinkedIn and teaching them how to do that, because that's a latent asset that perhaps they're not leveraging and should be leveraging.
Terrific. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that the benefit that senior attorneys have when it comes to clients of yours at Good to Be Social, of course, senior attorneys could become clients and hire digital marketing companies, but we're often promoting that senior attorneys join firms that they don't have to relearn or really learn from the beginning, in most cases, how to do digital marketing. Join a firm that's already committed
Absolutely.
to that strategy. Let them on board not only the attorney, him or herself, but on board that digital value, that digital history that they can present to really help the growing firm engage in the D2C marketing world that we're in. So last question for you, Guy, is, where do you see D2C marketing for law firms in 2021 and throughout the rest of this decade, really?
So I think what's happening now is firms are really starting to narrow their focus and target their content at the people that are most likely to hire them, right? And a lot of times that not necessarily new clients, but actually existing clients. So how can you actually target your best clients and expand the amount of business you're doing with them, right? Maybe your firm is doing tax work for a particular company, but you're not doing the corporate work, or you're not doing the IP work, and you could be doing that. So how do you actually penetrate that law firm, expand their share of wallet, and do more business with that firm? So if you're able to develop that type of strategy, then you can take that strategy and apply it to similarly situated prospects that may be companies or individuals that have those same needs or same issues that they're facing.
Terrific. Well, Guy Alvarez, Good to Be Social. Guy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
I'm very excited to introduce Chris Dreyer of Rankings.io. Chris, great to see you. Full disclosure to the audience, I'm a full-fledged fan of Chris's podcast, the Rankings podcast. Chris publishes a podcast episode. Chris, you should be paying me for this, by the way, but here we go. Every Thursday. And Chris is sharing with his audience either a marketing specialist for law firms or a preeminent trial attorney, personal injury law attorney that shares how they have gotten to the top of an extremely competitive field of business that they're in, and how they stay there. And that's really so much of what Chris does with Rankings.io. Chris is an SEO specialist in a niche area of personal injury law. Chris, I'm excited for our conversation and love to hear some origin story about you and Rankings.io before we jump into the questions on D2C marketing opportunities that senior attorneys present to growing law firms.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks so much for having me, and also the kind words, and you can be my sponsor anytime.
Thank you.
So a little bit, my background is I've been doing digital marketing for about 15 years. I originally worked with all attorneys, any practice area, and did a whole host of services. But since about 2018, we've really been niched down to working with personal injury law firms and some of the larger personal injury law firms in their respective city.
Great. So let's just jump right into it. Okay. Digital value and the digital history of senior attorneys. Chris, I'm often working with attorneys that are superstars. And as you know, Senior Attorney Match has experience in the personal injury law field and work with PI attorneys that have been former presidents of their local trial attorney associations. They have written articles, they've led CLEs, often involved in national organizations such as the American Association for Justice, AAJ, but they're just playing catch up when it comes to, frankly, your clients, Chris, that are plowing in hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars a year, and they could play catch up and actually do it themselves. But could you speak for a moment or two, Chris, about the digital value and the digital history that these senior attorneys have? What do they present to growing law firms?
There's so much value in these senior attorneys. And the reason is because they bring with them a lot of digital prominence. And just the definition of prominence is just being everywhere. And Google's actual local algorithm is defined by relevance. Does the website match up to a query or their respective category, proximity, their location, and then prominence is just being everywhere. So these senior attorneys, they've been in these high profile cases. They've been in different directories, whether it's Avvo, Martindale. They're just listed everywhere on the web. So whenever you hire one of these individuals, it just helps compound your digital marketing strategy because they have their own sphere of influence, their own brand, and just it allows you to obtain backlinks from media mentions, press mentions. There's a tremendous amount of value when you have that opportunity.
Great. And what about the senior attorneys that they haven't done it before? I mean, as if one of these senior attorneys was to join a growing law firm of Rankings.io, and you were to look at that history, could you share with us a few examples of how, let's just say, the attorney that had the largest verdict. Let's just focus on PI for a moment. There's often senior attorneys that have the largest verdict. Here I am in Massachusetts. Let's pick on Suffolk County, which is where Boston, Massachusetts is. Largest verdict in Suffolk County in the last 10 years on, let's say, a nursing home case. Okay. Now that made it to the local law journal. And the attorney was probably excited. But if that attorney joined a growing law firm that's trying to really build up in the nursing home space, what would you do with that?
Oh, I would put it all over the website. It depends on the type of practice you have. If you're one of these firms that settles everything, a lot of pre-lit, and they aren't going to have the giant numbers that you can showcase on a website for social proof. So that on its own, the individual that's looking for maximum case value is going to look for that information on the website and just showcasing it on the homepage, on your case results pages, on your testimonials. You can even take these results and take their experience, do a press release when they join the firm, talk about their expertise. You can do press releases on their historical big wins. All of these lends itself to expertise. And that's what consumers are looking for. They're looking for the best representation, and they also want maximum value.
Great. And there's an adage that one of my clients shared with me once, and imagine you've probably heard of it too. That is that consumers look for young doctors and older lawyers, right? You want your young doctor to be on the cutting edge of technology, literally sometimes, right? But your lawyer you want to have is your sage attorney. So when a senior attorney is joining a firm, and here let's focus on PI, and you've got younger firms that don't necessarily have trial experience. I mean, they're bringing in the cases, but they don't necessarily have the lawyers in the firm that have deep trial experience, multiple jury verdicts. And then you're bringing in a senior attorney that has the verdicts behind them. What's the value that presents to a growing firm?
It just elevates all of your offers. So I can give you an actual example, an actual tangible one. And I talked to Stephen Gersten, Michigan Auto Law, recently on the podcast. And it was an interesting experience where he was handed a docket of cases, around 40, 50 cases. And just immediately he was getting 2 and 3 times the size of the offers, just because these insurance companies are now collecting data on the trial attorneys. They see how many cases they've taken to trial, what the amounts have been, and they're just willing to offer larger settlements on the front end just by the nature of having that historical record on the respective trial attorney.
Great. And we were talking before about social value, and so many senior attorneys that I work with, Chris, they just don't realize the social value that they have. And maybe you could just, in a closing few minutes that we have together, just lay out a few bullet points. I'd love for you to sort of make the audience feel good, right? I mean, because oftentimes I met with a client a few months ago, Chris, right? And he was really bummed out, okay? Because he's a bankruptcy attorney. Okay. And he knows bankruptcy law through and through. But a guy about 10 miles to the east of him is cleaning his clock. Okay, because that person has a digital marketing strategy. And he was really bummed out. And I'm just wondering, from your standpoint as an SEO specialist, this guy who should really be on the floor, on the court, on the field, right? He should be just cranking out the bankruptcy, getting bankruptcy work, because frankly, he deserves it. He has built up the quality side of the reputation. He just doesn't have the social value in today's digital marketing world to attract it. What are some bullet points that you could offer to that person or other senior attorneys about, guys, you've really got great value, just you've got to think about these elements?
The biggest thing is keeping a docket or some type of log of all the relationships you've built with your past cases and using that as leverage. That's very difficult to obtain, and to have this history. One of the biggest ranking factors for local SEO is the number of reviews. So if you can reach back out to your consumers that you've worked with in the past to see if they can speak on your behalf, that's a huge advantage. It's very difficult to replicate. And it is, by the nature of itself, ranking in those first position, there is a perception that firm is better. So if you can actually, take your reviews and your history and then apply that to the firm that you're working with, that's a huge competitive advantage. The other things that I would say is just the social aspect of mentorship and being able to apply some of those skills to the less experienced trial attorneys. That elevates your positioning as a thought leader. Also, having those results will get you invited to more speaking engagements, CLEs, things of that nature, which can really be a huge competitive advantage.
Great. And to the growing law firms that are bringing in the cases, what's your rationale and some bullet points there for why they really should be thinking to bring in senior attorneys that have the content, that have the experience, and what value do you think from a D2C standpoint, in terms of the consumer that is online searching for the firm? What does the senior attorney that joins a growing law firm, what are some bullet points there for how that adds value to a growing law firm from a D2C standpoint, D2C marketing standpoint?
The biggest thing is they already have the experience. If you think about Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours before you're an expert, they have the reps. So they've experienced some of these issues before, and they know what works and what doesn't work. So they can apply that to the consumer. It lends itself to a lot of trust. Anytime on the front end of a sales cycle, whenever you get involved with someone more experienced that can really set expectations, is a tremendous amount of value, because when you set those expectations properly, it lends itself to trust, and then you can turn those individuals into evangelists for future referrals, future reviews, and that's what they bring to the table.
Well, terrific. Chris Dreyer, Rankings.io. Chris, thank you very much for joining today.
Jeremy, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Great, thank you. I'm very excited to introduce Stacy Burke of Stacy E. Burke PC. Hi, Stacy. Great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. And Stacy, before we start delving into the topic of the D2C marketing opportunities that senior attorneys present to growing law firms, love to hear your origin story. You're an attorney by background, and now you've evolved into the master strategist at Stacy E. Burke PC. So love to hear how you went from practicing attorney to master strategist to help attorneys market for new business.
Sure. And thank you for having me. And hello, everyone watching. So this year, I will have been licensed in Texas as a lawyer for 20 years. I started my career before I even went to law school working at a maritime injury firm on the plaintiff side, and continued my work there for 11 years. When my undergraduate degree is in public relations journalism, so I was always a pretty decent writer and communicator. So when blogging kind of became a thing, it was sort of put in my lap as, well, you're already a good writer, why don't you give this a shot? And I became sort of good at marketing, learning about blogging, self-taught, learning about social media, also self-taught, and became so adept at acquiring clients online that I was hired away by a larger firm to work as a partner, 8 offices in 6 cities in Texas, and left there 8 years ago to become a consultant working with firms across the country on marketing, business development, advertising, and some infrastructure and technology as well.
Well, great. Thank you. And I'll tell you, I love this part of your website where you lay it out so clearly. You say, well, the number one rule of marketing, go where the audience is. And in today's market, that means social media. And so could you just share with us, why is it that it's social media today for digital marketing for lawyers? And then we'll shift to senior attorneys, but just love to hear your thoughts on the importance of social media for law firms today in 2021.
I think that even before the pandemic, which has forced us even more to communicate digitally and online and in these various virtual formats, I think people have begun to want to digest things in smaller bites and more quickly. And one of the easiest ways to do that is on social media. This is how we stay connected to family and friends that live all around the world. This is how we maintain professional connections with people that we maybe went to law school with, for me 20 years ago, that I don't see on a regular basis because they may not live where I live or practice in the area that I practice within. And so people are on these networks, whether they're in the legal industry or whether they're a stay-at-home mom. They're using at least one, if not multiple, social networks on a daily basis. And I would say even the American Bar Association has recognized and reported on the fact that I think their most recent numbers were that 35% of lawyers say that they received leads from being present on social media in 2020, which is just last year. So people are there, but you're also able to generate business there. And a lot of it is either free or relatively inexpensive. So it's a very worthwhile and cost-effective method of brand awareness and client acquisition.
Terrific. And Stacey, you certainly practice what you preach, because I would certainly recommend that people visit your website. It is filled with great content, great blog posts. And we want to spend time now going over one of your blogs from 2019, because you laid out there your tips for content marketing for law firms. And I just want to twist that a bit and ask for your suggestions about how the following tips apply when a senior attorney or a senior attorney-led firm joins a growing law firm. And the first tip that you give is what you call good enough to eat, where EAT is an acronym of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. How does expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, how does that fit within a content strategy when a senior attorney joins a growing law firm?
So it's a great question. And I love, Google has all of these acronyms that it creates, and it happens to use this acronym over 130 times in its own guidelines as far as guiding those of us who read their technical specifications as far as how to be successful online. So this is an important one. So demonstrating good EAT, both on your website and off of your website, can help the rankings for your website. And it matters really for every website, but Google specifically says it matters absolutely imperatively for what they call YMYL websites, or your money or your life websites. And those are usually lawyers, doctors, accountants, and other financial services providers. EAT is crucial. It's basically on-site signals that show third-party verification of your credibility. If you're board certified, if you've tried a certain number of cases, if you've won awards, all of the things that would go in a bio or a CV about you on a law firm's website, as well as off-site signals. Which I know someone mentioned earlier, media mentions, case results, the attorney profiles that exist online, super lawyers, best lawyers, all of these off-site signals and on-site mentions combine to make the power of someone like a very experienced practitioner extremely valuable from that perspective, as far as making a website more trustworthy, more authoritative, because they just have that, established that across their career in a way that a newer practitioner or a less experienced practitioner has been able to.
Terrific. So now let's assume that the firm satisfies the EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, and the senior attorney who has all of those, has the expertise, has authority, has the trust of clients, referral sources, often the legal community where a senior attorney is practicing. Your next tip is go omni-channel or go home. And how does a growing law firm say to the senior attorney who's practiced 30 years and is very comfortable with books and writing and typing, how do they take advantage of introducing the EAT in an omni-channel marketplace?
It's such a good question. And I can speak mostly from my background is as a personal injury plaintiff's lawyer. And so a lot of the more experienced attorneys that I've worked with are litigators. So they're great orators, they're great speakers. They've been speaking publicly, both in court and at CLEs and in front of groups for their entire careers. So while you might think, oh, well, this person's in their 60s, they're not going to know what to do with video, they're all going to be amazing on video. And so you can take something that might have been created a while ago, or that might be a little bit dense, and take chunks of it out and repurpose them for each of these various channels, right? For Twitter, for YouTube, for Facebook, for every channel that's out there. And so if you can kind of pick out components from things that have already been created by or for your more senior attorneys, and either repurpose them using their face on video, or have someone consolidate it down into shorter bits of a blog, it will really go very far.
Great. And if I can just reduce the anxiety for the senior attorneys, they don't need to understand fully Twitter. They don't need to fully understand how to upload a 30-second video FAQ onto YouTube. I mean, this is what companies like yours do. Is that right?
Correct. No, the technical side of it is not necessary. Even really understanding why we are saying, searchers are using these questions to search. We want you to answer this question in 30 seconds or less. Shooting the video, we'll edit it down. We upload it. We upload the schema and all of the code associated with embedding it into the website properly. No, they don't need to do anything except show up, sit in front of the camera, and speak about something that they're an absolute expert on, like what to do after a car accident. Any of these attorneys who are experienced can do that with zero preparation and do an excellent job.
Terrific. And the next tip that you have is also going to make every senior attorney that's ever been told by whether it's somebody in their office or a family member that they can speak less to get the point across. Your tip is actually more words, less pages. Can you tell us what that tip is?
Sure. So that really means that Google now favors long form content. And so, whereas it used to be the strategy several years ago was, I want to have a website with 1,000 pages, and it doesn't really matter how much content or what the word count is, or if there's video or any sort of multimedia on each one of those pages. Now, Google prefers sites that have long form content. So they want, posts to be 1,000 words, 2,000 words. And so this is where that expertise comes in. You want to break up those words with some imagery, with a video, break it up a little bit because it's harder for consumers to digest, but search engines really do like and consider it more authoritative and more expert content when it's longer, and they will show it in search results more often. I think it's something like the average organic search result page of content at the top is somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 words now.
Wow, thank you. And your last tip that we'll go over, and you've referenced it a couple times. And I remember in trial techniques class, they said if you say something 3 times, the jury will remember it. So this is your last tip:
Okay.
Video, video, video. And so could you explain why?
So at least one statistic says that if you have video on your website, it's 53 times more likely to get a spot on the first page of organic search results. So that's one reason why. That's a technical Google reason why. I would say from a usability standpoint, from a user experience standpoint, right? So for me, I am, if I'm getting my kids ready in the morning for school, going to be much more easily able to watch a 15, 30, or 60-second video about something than I am to read a 2,000 word blog post. So if you're trying to appeal to a broader audience, you want to have all of the different types of multimedia available so that each type of user that visits your site or visits your social channels or peruses your profiles can kind of read what they want or view what they want. People like to see other people. They like to humanize the brand. They want to see the face of the brand. They want to hear you talk. They want to know what kind of person you are before they meet with you in person. And video does all of that.
Yeah, I agree. And so now I want to go beyond senior attorneys. I mean, what are your thoughts generally about video for law firms? I mean, my observation is law firms just don't use video nearly enough. Are you seeing it trending up, that more videos are coming in, video bios, other forms of videos? Or do you think that there's still a lot of room for expansion and more use of video for law firms generally?
I think it varies by practice area. I think it varies by size of firm. And I think it varies by management structure. The firms that are larger and have more bureaucratic red tape that they have to go through to make these shifts in their strategy have a harder time incorporating new features. There is also a reluctance on behalf of a lot of attorneys, me included. Sometimes I don't want to be on video. Sometimes I hate watching myself on video afterwards and editing video of myself. You kind of have to get over it. And just put yourself out there and talk about what you know. So as far as increase, I don't know if there's been an increase. I do think that more firms in the personal injury space are definitely using video. It's become more of a standard than an option. For a lot of the personal injury firms that we work with, we recommend it, we set up the shoots, and we upload them not all at once, but strategically over time on an ongoing basis. And that video is usable in so many different places that I think firms don't realize, right? You can add it to your Google My Business listing. You can put it on your super lawyer's profile. Like one video, one 30-second video goes a long way. It can be repurposed a lot of different places. And it's such a good visual representation of who you are, how you sound, and what you have to say that it's kind of a no-brainer. And now with iPhones being as awesome as they are, and other phones, you can really shoot them yourself. You can get good at it and shoot them yourself. I like professional shoots, but a lot of people have been very successful online shooting their own video.
Terrific. Well, Stacy Burke of Stacy E. Burke PC, based in Houston. Stacy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to introduce Matt Green. Matt joins us from Juris Digital, and Matt focuses on digital marketing for law firms. And Matt, I'm very excited and thank you for joining us today. And before we delve into today's topic on the D2C marketing opportunities that senior attorneys present to growing law firms, could you share with us your origin story? Tell us about Juris Digital, and welcome. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, my origin story, that makes me feel like a superhero, which I'm not. But so yeah, I graduated college in 2010, which was a tough time to graduate college. I was kind of floating around, didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was a decent writer, so I went on Craigslist and looked for writing jobs. I got hired as a blog writer for an SEO company, which I had never heard of. And that was with my now partner, Casey Mraz. And I was spending my days writing, you know, looking back, very mediocre, low quality blog posts. But I was also learning SEO, search engine optimization. I just fell in love with it. I love the idea of marketing being something that meets the consumer where they are and earns their trust by providing, you know, an answer to their problems, rather than being in their face and interrupting them. So I loved SEO as a marketing channel, fell in love with it, kind of was self-taught, in addition to having some really good mentorship from Casey as well. And then, yeah, over the years, our business kind of evolved. Our relationship with my partner kind of evolved. And we started realizing that we had the most passion for marketing attorneys and law firms. And really, it was because we were finding them to be the most passionate clients of ours. They wanted to help more people, right? That was their goal for doing marketing, is they wanted to be able to take on more cases, help more people. So yeah, now that's how we've kind of positioned Juris Digital, is we're a digital marketing agency who wants to help lawyers do what they do, which is help people.
Terrific. And we're going to go to a case study in just a moment. But before we do that, the big letter word that I hear all the time when it comes to digital marketing generally is content. And could you tell us, why is it that content wins, the right content together with the right digital strategy? How do you find that that's a winning combination for your clients?
Yeah, there's a popular saying in digital marketing that content is king. I despise that saying for a lot of reasons. It's cliche. I don't like cliches, but it also supposes that there's anything but content, which there isn't. I mean, everything we do is content. Everything we put on our website is content. Social media is content. Everything's content. So there's not really anything but your content. It takes different formats, right? It can be written, it can be video, it can be audio clips, it can be whatever. But content's all there is. And so if that's our first or only, touch point to our potential clients, we have to be delivering something that's differentiated from anything else they're finding. So it has to be differentiated, and then it also has to be extremely compelling based on the situation they're in. It's not good enough to just rank #1 for a keyword. You also have to deliver content with that ranked page that speaks to exactly what that searcher is after. So yeah, content's absolutely essential. And I assume we'll talk about ways that attorneys can improve that, especially with a more experienced lawyer.
Terrific. So we're going to call up now a case study, because this is a very typical situation, Matt, that I'll see, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on if this client came through your door at Juris Digital, and this particular attorney, let's say, was going to be joining a growing law firm. What would be your advice for this attorney? So I'll go over the fact pattern of who this attorney is. So we've got attorney David Jones. He's a 67-year-old Denver, Colorado-based PI attorney. Attorney Jones is a former president of the Denver Trial Attorney Association. He's active in AAJ. He's got a history of gigantic jury verdicts, several seven-figure verdicts. He's recently gotten involved in representing senior citizens in nursing home negligence cases, other forms of negligence cases involving seniors. He's the author of several articles in his states in the Colorado Law Journal, and he's active on several nonprofit organization boards. But here's the but, Matt, and there's one other piece also that we'll share about Attorney Jones, which is that he enjoys writing, and he actually, because of his trial experience, he enjoys being in front of the camera, he enjoys being in front of an audience. But the issue is, and I see this very often, Matt, is that he's not getting new cases, at least the kinds of cases that he should be getting, because your clients, frankly, are beating him to the punch with digital marketing strategies. So if an attorney like Attorney Jones joined a Juris Digital growing law firm and had that type of bio, could you share with us some examples of how you would utilize his digital history, his digital present, and his digital future to really make tremendous win-wins for himself, the firm, and clients who he should be in front of?
Yeah, so I'll try to be really tactical. One way that I'm seeing our clients sign really good cases is by writing about, in depth, as much depth as they can go into, the results that they've achieved in recent cases, and based on the type of cases they want, right? So with this attorney coming in, he has these great results in nursing home abuse. There's actually people every day searching Google for things like nursing home abuse settlements, nursing home abuse cases. They're searching these keywords because they think they might have a case and they want to see what sort of end result they could be looking at. By having that attorney go and write up all of his best, summaries of all of his best cases, you're creating content that's going to serve that exact user intent when people are searching those keywords. And so you talk about, bringing in relevant users. there couldn't be anything more relevant than somebody who's actually searching for what kind of settlement can I get. That's a person who really believes they have a case. You want to be in front of that person. So that would be like very specific, very tactical advice for what you could do. I think leveraging their network to get reviews. Chris mentioned this. Go back to every client they've worked with ever and say, hey, can you go leave us a Google review? Can you go leave us a Facebook review? Reviews are social proof that people need. I mean, the way people shop and buy things, the only thing that's changed is the tools they use. People are the same in terms of they still want a personal recommendation, right? But now that personal recommendation is the form of a Google review or some other review online. So go and leverage their, past clients to get reviews for your firm now. What else could we do? I mean, there's a ton that's a little less tactical, but it has to do with branding and bringing in this person's past success and their career accomplishments into your brand messaging to differentiate yourself from your competitors, right? If you're a younger firm that doesn't necessarily have that history of case results, you bring in somebody who does. Now you can take ownership of that, and you can say we're the type of firm that gets these type of results, and that can guide your brand messaging and how you're talking about yourself to people. So those are really the big ones that come to my head.
And Google reviews. I'm wondering, as an attorney, when I think of Google reviews, I'm often thinking about, the restaurant that I'm going to be going to, the hotel, on my next vacation. What are the reviews there? The consumer is used to consumer reviews. Heck, if I'm going to buy something on Amazon, am I buying, this or that? And I'm going to read the reviews. Could you speak to us in the last few minutes that we have about where you see and what you see as the importance of lawyers, senior attorneys, and law firms generally asking their clients and even their referral sources too for reviews?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely critical, if for no other reason than all of the firms who are winning online are doing it. And so when people shop, which people do, if they say this firm has 4.7 aggregate stars out of 5 reviews, and this one has 4.6 out of 500, the 4.6 out of 500 is winning that business. That shows a business that's thriving and that is continually working. Another thing that doesn't always get talked about or thought about is, frequency of reviews. When somebody goes to hire a lawyer or any service provider, that's not necessarily a brand they're familiar with, right? That's not Verizon. It's not whatever. It's a little law firm that maybe they've never heard of. And so they want to see, are these people doing business? And frequency of reviews can indicate that, right? If you have a review coming in every week or every month even, you're showing people we're open for business. We're helping people, every day, and they're coming on Google and they're saying how great we are. And so the reviews are critical for lots of reasons. It's got to be an absolute habit of your firm to be requesting reviews.
And is that something that you're recommending to your clients in terms of, is there even a format for how to ask clients for, lawyers by nature are very cautious. And so is there a format that you recommend for how to ask for reviews?
Sure. There's businesses who do lots of volume of business, a laundromat, a restaurant, whatever. They use kind of automated sources. They'll send you a text message. Hey, did you have a good hamburger today? Leave us a review. With lawyers, even large law firms, the volume isn't insane. And so, and that's built on personal relationships and personal connections. So really it's just about approaching humans like a human and saying, hey, Pat, we just settled up the case. I hope you had a good experience. It would be great if you could leave a Google review and tell people, what you thought of our firm. Just be a human. That's the best way to do it. And obviously use discretion. it doesn't always go well, right? You don't have to reach out to people who you know didn't have a great outcome to leave you a review, but certainly tap that larger contingency of people that did have a good experience.
Well, terrific. Matt Green, Juris Digital. Matt, thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on the case study. Real pleasure to have you. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thanks, Jeremy.
So now we're going to welcome back our guest from today's live stream, and we're going to be presenting a question for each of our guests to address and to talk among ourselves. The question that our guests that are all digital marketing specialists for lawyers, the question that we're going to be presenting to our guests is, what 2 tips do you recommend for growing law firms to utilize a senior attorney's digital value? So what are 2 tips that you'd recommend that when a senior attorney or senior attorney-led firm joins a growing law firm, that firm can benefit from the senior attorney's digital value? So excited to welcome back our guests to address that question. So thank you, everyone. And Chip, love to start with you and your thoughts and 2 tips that you'd recommend to growing firms when they welcome in senior attorneys and they're getting that great goodwill, subject matter knowledge, their client list, their referral source list. What 2 tips do you recommend?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of value in that list, like you've mentioned, and several others have as well. So put them into your marketing system, your automation system. Make sure that you have as many data points filled so that you can segment that list. Work with the incoming attorney who may have some of those answers to be able to track those down. So I guess that would be one. And the other is I would probably start out by going into, don't shut down their website out of the gate. Make sure you go into your Google Search Console and find out which specific pages are showing up in search and which ones are performing well. And then you have some decisions to make. I don't think there's a one size fits all, but grab those pieces of content that are doing well, that are performing well. If you can retain some of that link juice that's pointing back to them by doing a redirect or by retaining, keeping it where it is and updating the existing site, then that's what I would start to take a look at. So now you're identifying those high value pieces. So really go in, flesh out that list as best you can. There's a tremendous amount of value there. And then I would go in and start looking at the data to see what's performing well and what's performing well that also indicates that it's likely to result in people contacting the firm for a case.
Terrific. And Chip, I'll just add on, because you and I have talked about this offline. I think it's something to just go a little bit more under the hood on, which is people, of course, are very familiar with porting a phone number, right? Often one of the most valuable parts of a senior attorney's practice is the phone number, right? They've had that same 4400 extension, okay, for a generation. And Chip, you pointed out to me that we're now entering into an era where senior attorneys have very well-built websites. And often those senior attorneys are joining firms where in reality, they're going to become part of that firm. They might have been Jim Jones PC, and now Jim Jones PC is joining the XYZ firm, and they're not going to add the Jones name. But to your point, and if you could just spell out a little bit more for us about the porting concept is something that makes a lot of sense. How do you take, if no longer the Jones website is going to be an active website, but if somebody's typing in something and the Jones website had very good traction on that particular topic, how can the XYZ firm benefit from the equivalent of the 4400 phone number?
Yep. So it's a good question, and it gets into kind of a technical answer that I'm semi-qualified, I think, to answer, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But we could do a number of different types of redirects of a domain. And so, if you've ever, worked with a company that's changed domains, changed names, for example, then often what you'll do is you'll do a redirect from the old site to the new. And in the most basic way, you could do what's called a wildcard redirect, and it's just going to move everything that goes there to the corresponding page potentially on the new site or to the home page. And I think that if you have if you have a site that's really performing, you're going to want to do a deeper dive, talk to someone who's really into the weeds there. But you have a couple of options. One, you can update some of the brand elements on the old site and retain that domain. Update to the new phone number, say, hey, this is where this lives right now, but keep some of those pieces. Now that's going to have some maintenance and management costs associated with maintaining those two sites. The other way that we could do that is we could do a 301 redirect on each of those pieces of content and move those pages onto the new site. So you take the content, you copy it, you paste it basically onto the new site. Don't have those two live pieces existing at the same time, but then do a page-by-page redirect that says, hey, this used to live here and now it lives here. And you'll get diminishing returns on that over time because those links to that old content will go away over time. But that's one way to retain some of that value. And it may take a while to lose it too, because now you're not going to show that link as being a broken link. So other webmasters won't necessarily pull that off their site.
Well, certainly a lot of this probably went over a lot of our heads, including mine. But we as the lawyers on here, that we learned UCC Article 2 and UCC Article 7, and I mean I'm only referencing those because those technical pieces, of whether it's the law or what you're talking about, can add a lot of value to what growing law firms need and want when senior attorneys join them. So now, Guy Alvarez of Good to Be Social, Guy, will turn to you. What 2 tips would you recommend to a growing law firm that welcomes in a senior attorney or a senior attorney-led firm? What 2 tips do you recommend in terms of leveraging the senior attorney's digital value?
So I think I mentioned one before, which is making sure that senior attorney that's joining the firm, making sure that he adds or tries to add as many of his clients and existing clients to his social networks. So that you can leverage those connections. I would go one step further. If there is an existing email list, you can actually take that list, upload it into LinkedIn or Facebook, and create a matched audience campaign as well, where you're announcing the senior lawyer joining the new firm. Also, the social media properties of the senior lawyer. You don't want to just shut those down right away. You want to basically keep those up and let people know that this lawyer has now joined the new firm, and have a link to the new firm's social media properties. And last but not least, I would make the lawyer a manager or an admin of the new firm's LinkedIn or Facebook account to give him an opportunity to add a lot of those people to the company page on LinkedIn by asking them to like or follow the page. So those would be the things. One other thing I might mention is leverage all of the content that has been created and repurpose that content. So if that lawyer has any articles that he's written in the past, any CLE presentations, really take that content, repurpose it, and share it anew in different formats. The more ways that you can repurpose, the better off you're going to be.
Terrific. Such valuable advice. And what I'll just share, as you were saying that, Guy, it just really made me think of an expanding pie of options. In a pre-Google world, when lawyers would join other firms, and this still happens today, and it's the mentality of many firms today, but the typical 2 things that would be done would be, number 1, a letter would go to the clients announcing that Lawyer Jones has joined the XYZ firm. The second thing that would be done is an ad would be placed in your local law journal to announce to the lawyer community that Attorney Jones has now joined the XYZ firm. Everybody high fives each other, and we're done. But what you just laid out, Guy, in such a great way is such an expansion of the pie of what can be done and what needs to be done in a D2C marketing world where clients are searching for lawyers on Google. Everything that you just said, you can make such a larger splash and get so much more value over utilizing those different methods that you just shared with us. So, Stacy, now we're setting the stage for you. Stacy Burke of Stacy Burke PC. Stacy, the question to you is: senior attorney joins a growing law firm. What 2 tips would you recommend to that growing law firm to really utilize the senior attorney's digital value?
So one would be, these attorneys have very established careers, and they've been members of professional associations, trade industry groups. had articles published online, and have won awards, such that they'll have all of these, sometimes hundreds of digital citations to their name, many of which will be associated with prior entities, many of which they've never claimed. And so having someone find and claim and build out all of those listings to now point toward the primary digital asset for the firm where they'll be working is great. And in addition to that, a lot of these attorneys have had media coverage over the course of their careers. And so, some websites already have a kind of an as seen in, or media mentions, or a featured in sort of stripe or design element or even page on their website. If not, they can add or create one and utilize all of the different media coverage that these attorneys have received over time as an additional verifying factor for potential clients who are looking up the firm. Now someone at the firm, and therefore the firm as a whole, has been mentioned in, CNN, Houston Chronicle, whatever the publication may be. So I think those are two really great tips. And then I would also add, which is an offline tip, I know you give it, but I would say that one of the most valuable components of having senior attorneys come into a firm is to be able to mentor the younger attorneys or the less experienced attorneys, or those of us who didn't get a chance to have a lot of trial experience earlier in our careers. And sitting in mediation, sitting in depositions, just being there and being present adds value to each individual matter. So don't forget that either, even though it's not online per se.
You're right, and that's just a tremendous value that senior attorneys provide. And one thing I'll add to that, and in terms of the D2C value, and I'll reference a client of mine at Spadea Liana, which is based in Philadelphia, and Harold Kestenbaum joined that firm, and their website, if people go to it, it's spadealaw.com, right in the hero section of the site is a video showing Harold together with the two partners where he joined. And Harold's this tremendous mentor, but he's also such a fixture in the franchise world that he's mentoring people and is also providing this tremendous trust transfer of saying, hey, I've joined this firm and I'm here not only mentoring these attorneys, but I trust them that my clients are in good hands with this growing law firm. So Matt Green of Juris Digital, the question to you, Matt, is that if you were advising growing law firm welcomes in senior attorneys into their practice, what are two tips that you're offering to that growing law firm to really utilize the digital value of the senior attorneys that join that firm?
Yeah, it's hard to go last, isn't it? So many smart things have been said. I would first and foremost see if they have a Google My Business listing from maybe an office that they had. Because Juris Digital, we just did a study, click study, that shows that for local-based lawyer keywords, so think like DUI lawyer, Denver, or whatever, about 30% of all the clicks go to Google's map pack of results. So that is just super valuable search real estate. If the attorney you're bringing on has an office or had an office, they might have that claimed Google My Business listing, which is what gets you on Google Maps. And you want to be very strategic about how you utilize that. You don't just want to kill it and say this business is closed. One way you could go about it is if their office was in the town over, just rebrand that as the new firm, and now you have a new location. That's your office now. Another way you can go about it is you can say this business is now this business. And then if that lawyer had any reviews, those are going to all transfer to the new firm. And then I've also seen instances where that actually improves rankings as well, because you kind of get this aggregate effect of authority joining authority, and now you have this kind of mega Google My Business listing that ranks a lot better. So that would be one. The other one would be, it's kind of been said, but kind of going back through and collating every bit of content that lawyer's ever produced, offline, online, whatever, auditing that thoroughly, and figuring out how to repurpose that for the web, how to repurpose it for search. That's my area, so that's what I'm always thinking about. How can we use this person's kind of career's worth of content generation to expand the net that we're casting online and get in front of people who have queries that could be potential clients. That would be the second tip.
Terrific. Thank you, Matt. And so I'll chime in with 2 tips as well. The 2 tips that I would suggest is that, number one, that a growing law firm certainly retain one of you. Okay, a company that specializes in digital marketing for law firms, absolutely convinced that having a digital marketing team needs to be part of the operating expenses of every growing law firm today, because the market has changed. We are in a D2C marketing environment. And if you don't have a digital marketing team behind you, you're going to not generate as many clients as you would without a digital marketing team behind you. Just like you have a copy machine and you have a commercial lease and you have billing software, this is an expense item that law firms need in a post-COVID environment, where COVID brought us much closer to 2030 than we are to 2019. The second tip is for the senior attorneys to embrace the fact that growing law firms know how to do this. Do what you do well. Okay, you have the clients, you have the referral sources, you have the subject matter knowledge, and you have the goodwill. Trust in the growing law firms that they can leverage all of that, and that will attract higher value, higher quality clients to your practice. And in reality, growing law firms will continue to attract clients that you should be in front of. And by joining a growing law firm and collaborating with them on this tremendous digital value that you as a senior attorney have developed over the course of your career, leads to tremendous win-wins. It's a win for yourself, it's a win for the firm that you join, and it's a win for the clients that really deserve to be in front of you at this point in your careers. So with that said, I want to thank each of you, Chip, Stacy, Matt Green, Guy Alvarez. We were joined earlier by Chris Dreyer. Thank you all for all of your time, and really appreciate all of your insights and your great experience. And we focused on Big C content today, and very, very appreciative of all the content that you shared with us during today's live stream. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.